Welcome to the On Adventure podcast. I'm Josh Self, and I'll be your host today. On this episode of On Adventure, I'm joined by Luis Rivera. And his story is nothing short of an expedition, one filled with sharp turns, steep climbs, and unexpected summits. Luis takes us from his early days on a tiny island off of Puerto Rico. From there, his path winds through injury, reinvention, and a relentless pursuit of excellence that eventually lands him in the national spotlight as a collegiate track and field champion. But this isn't just a story about sports. It's about the mental mountains we all have to climb and how the hardest trails often teach us the most about who we really are. If you've ever found yourself at a crossroads wondering whether to turn back or keep going, Luis's journey is the reminder we all need that every setback can be a compass and every detour might just lead to a deeper kind of discovery. You're going to want to lean into this one. All right, Luis Rivera, welcome to the On Adventure podcast, and I'm very excited to have you here. You've even had your own adventure this afternoon, just getting to this conversation today. So sometimes these things come at us and we can't do anything about it, and I'm sure you'll wax very eloquent on that topic, but I'm excited to talk to you about your life experiences, and some of them chosen, some of them not, and what they have done to push you, show you what you're capable of, and anything else that you've learned in that process. So late on a Friday afternoon, I am very grateful that you're here with me and that we're going to have this hour conversation and see where it goes.
Absolutely. And I'm appreciative of your time and your patience. So excited to be here as well, learn more about you and share my story.
Cool. Well, tell everybody listening who you are, where you're at, and a little bit about where you've come from.
Yeah. So my name is Luis. I've had many different roles in a way, throughout life. Currently, I'm a sales expert. I sell technology. I've been living in North Carolina now going on 5 years. I was born in Puerto Rico, moved to upstate New York when I was 11, turning 12. I've always loved sports and constantly just looking to see, how I can push myself and try new things. I like to say I'm an adventurous person. I like to take on challenges, but that's where I am now in life, entering my early 30s. Things are slowly changing, but I'm enjoying the process so far.
Cool. So moving not only to somewhere different, but from Puerto Rico to upstate New York at 12, what is that, like fifth or sixth grade?
Yep. I was in the middle of my fifth grade. Yep. In the middle of my fifth grade, I believe it was.
Was this something that you recall being excited for? Like it's a new opportunity, or was it like, oh my gosh, my life is over?
No, but to be fully honest with you, by any means, this is not a knock on my parents. My parents did the best they could with what they have, and I love my parents dearly. But at that point in my life, there was so much uncertainty about everything around me. I guess there wasn't a lot of stability in a way. So I remember being anxious. Like I remember thinking, oh man, English has to become my first language. I need to now go from small school in an island of population. I say Puerto Rico, but it was an island called Vieques, which is east of Puerto Rico. It has a population of about 10,000 people. Going to school there and thinking I need to go to America, right? And when you live there, you think of America as this just humongous adventure where anything is possible. So I certainly remember being anxious, but at the same time being so distracted by so many different things going on in my life that at that point by that age, I was already used to just adjusting to things because I had to, right? It was almost like a survival instinct.
Yeah. So did you know any English when you moved?
I knew some. So I was very lucky to have an aunt that lived in the States. By that point, my dad lived in the States and I had visited here and there. So I could understand it and I could defend myself pretty well, but I was not fluent and it was not my first language.
Well, I mean, at this point, if I didn't know that about your story, I would recognize no accent in your English at this point. So that you've obviously worked very hard to learn a new language, and I would imagine your language of origin is still strong with you, or is that not the case? Okay.
Oh yeah, it doesn't go away, and I have the family who is always very eager to remind me that I have to keep it, that I have to keep it and keep practicing it. No, and it's been useful in business and at work.
Yeah,
And it's
sure.
also, yeah, it's a beautiful language too. And I think that I've learned to appreciate that even more now as an adult and realizing, oh, how lucky I am that I did have the experience to grow up learning Spanish. And now I'm able to, be bilingual. And slowly I've been learning Portuguese the last year as well.
Okay.
And that's been made it easier. So certainly opened the avenues for certain different things as well.
So when you get like really fired up, do you like bounce between both languages, in the same sentence?
That's funny you say that. So it's not something I quite noticed, but I will say this: when I was a professional athlete a few years back, and I was training, there's a video of my personal best throw, and the words that came after the curse words were in Spanish, and it wasn't planned. I felt that it was a good throw. I felt that it was a good attempt, and it's just words just started coming out. And I remember watching the video after and be like, "Oh my God, I was cursing in Spanish." I didn't even realize. So I guess at the truest form, I think naturally, I probably go back to that. In today's world, I say, when English becomes or a language becomes your first language, I think the difference is that you internally start to think in that language. So I think I'm to the point now where my first thought is in English, but so I it doesn't switch back, but at times, yes, it can come out for sure.
That's fascinating. Very cool. So that is a transition not only at an age, but the size of the transition is massive. And there's probably parts of that are still with you in one way or another. I'm sure good and bad. I love that what you said at the very beginning of that too, about your parents. They did the best that they could with what they had. Like that is such a great way and super encouraging to me too, like to think in terms of the best, that we all do well if we could.
Yep.
Sometimes we just don't have the skills or the resources or the things needed to do it. And so I'm sure, well, I'm not sure of anything, but I would imagine that removes potentially any anger or bitterness or a lot of any negative feelings that you could have towards your parents, and gives you the ability to say it the way that you did, which is really cool. But I think what I want to try to do is understand what that experience did for you then through middle and high school.
Mm-hmm.
And I'd love for you to expound on this, because you've told me this previously. You really got into sports. Athletics became an outlet that you really excelled at. That I don't know if you can tell me if it was easy or not, but that was something that was like a sweet spot for you. So were athletics an escape from the difficulty of your transition, or was it the difficulty of the transition really was the gas in the tank to allow you to excel at athletics?
That's a great question. And I would say that it actually was an avenue or a tool to overcome the challenges. Now, I don't know where I learned this or where it came from, but before I moved to the States, I have an older brother who I love dearly. My older brother was the one who would get up early in the morning on Saturdays and play catch with me, right? He would be the one that would, and he's 5 years older than I am. So always instilled in me to play sports, but also, the conversations with him, and he was an athlete. And something that I think I realized then without really realizing it was, whether you speak a language, whether you agree with someone or not, I feel like sports in a way is like an international language, to be like, if you are good at a sport, right, one way you're either going to be respected or you're going to be appreciated.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that when this was all indirect, I moved. I remember my very first day being dropped off at the school I went to, which name was Martin Luther King Middle School in Rochester, New York, and kind of walking through the big building and being like, oh boy, like this is a lot. This does not feel. It wasn't like what I imagined. Some things were, but a lot of things weren't. And I remember at first being like, well, I can play basketball. I may not be able to speak with these kids fluently, but I know basketball. I know swimming. I know baseball, and I think that slowly through that avenue, it allowed me to create some relationships and allowed me to kind of come out of my comfort zone within something I was comfortable with, right? Obviously, in the States, sports in schools are a little bit more organized than I would say in Puerto Rico, just because of the resources and the culture. So that was easier to kind of get adjusted to. So I started with baseball through like a church league, and I loved being the pitcher. I had one heck of an arm on me. And then I did that for a few years. got into music, learned how to play the drums at church. And again, it was kind of, I would find these things to be like, I don't want to tell you that, I'm going to learn English, or I don't want to tell you that I want to make friends. It's kind of like, I'm going to focus on things that I want to do and things that I like to do. And eventually I feel like that would put me in a direction to be within the people that will accept me, right? Or give me the space where I can feel safe and kind of grow into. And I think that by accident, that's what happened, right? Played baseball, learned how to play the drums, made some friends there, got to high school, did some swimming, made friends there, and just slowly developed into eventually where I ended up.
What was by the time you got through high school, what was your main sport or sports?
I would say football. Yeah, it was
Football. Okay.
Yeah. And football was a bittersweet story, because I would say I found it a little bit later than most kids, right? We don't have football in Puerto Rico, but I'll say to the average human, I'm on the bigger side. I'm about 6 foot tall, currently 220 pounds. Back then I was pretty close in weight, just not the same composition. But I remember just loving the idea of doing something hard. And it all started with, 2-a-days during the summer.
Mm-hmm.
And my very first year, it was like summertime. Okay, I want to play football, and just having to go in the morning, having to go in the afternoon, and just being like, I like this. Like, I like the feeling of accomplishment. I know that I may not be able to connect with these kids based on how they grew up and all that, but I'm slowly starting to build kind of like a persona for myself, right? My name was Mean Machine, because it was hard for me to communicate with them, but whenever I was on that line and I got my hands on someone, I just wouldn't stop. I would drive and I would drive. And I love that. And, and I got a name, and that's kind of where the relationship started really building, and me learning like, oh, this is kind of like my identity, right? Like, if you keep your head down, if you work hard, right? Like, eventually you won't have to feel like you have to follow someone or pretend to be someone else to be part of a group. Like, people will just see you for who you are. And I'm very thankful that football gave me that. Sadly, at the end of my junior year, or towards the end of the season, we were at practice, and we had an accident. I was a nose guard, made a tackle on my running back, and I landed on my elbow, and I just tore my rotator cuff on my left side, and I fractured my collarbone, and that was it for football. And I'll say that's really kind of like where the story started. I thought that's where, it was beginning with football, but it really started like after football. It gave me the basis and mentality to be able to go on after that.
Why do you think you liked the 2-a-days? I can understand the fitting in piece, like using the platform of sport as an opportunity to fit in. I'm curious if also, and maybe I'm going in two different directions here, but over time, were you fitting in as Lewis, the guy that could play football, or was it Lewis as Lewis, right?
Yeah.
So riff a little bit on that. What are your thoughts?
Yeah. So first, with the 2-a-days, I think honestly it was, and to some people this might be misunderstood, but I think it was because it gave me time away from home, right? Like, I knew there were some things that I enjoyed when I was away from home, and it allowed me to kind of explore things on my own regarding relationships and building friendships and myself. In regards to, was it because you were Lewis's football player or because you were Lewis? To be honest with you, I didn't know who Lewis was back then. Back
fair
then
enough.
I was a lost kid who I had an idea of what I wanted. I had really good intuitions, from experiences I had early in life where I was forced to read the room, right? I had to make a guess of how the grownups around me were feeling or what they were going to do, so then I could respond accordingly at a very early age. So I wouldn't say I knew who I was, but I knew that it was a way for me to continue improving. So 2-a-days, it allowed me to kind of stay out of the house. Also, I've always been a physical person. I've always loved working out. I have memories of me like doing push-ups and working. I have memories of me one time when I was still living in Puerto Rico, and sorry to kind of go off topic, kind of related. I went missing, according to my mom, I went missing for a few hours, and the police was looking for me. I wasn't missing the night before, and I was 7 or 8 years old. The night before, I told my mom, and I said, Mom, tomorrow morning I'm getting up early and I'm going to go running. And she said, yeah, okay. I got up at 6 a.m. and I left. And I was running. When I remember coming down this hill in my neighborhood, And there were cops in front of my house, and my mom was like crying. They thought that I was like abducted or taken. And I was like, I told you I was going running. And they were like, what 7 or 8-year-old gets up at 6 a.m. to go run? Like, and I said, I told you I was going to. So, I feel like that's always just been part, they say some things you're born with. And I feel like that's something that
That's one of
I've
those
always
things.
been born with. Yeah.
Yeah. Very interesting. So I also tore my rotator cuff as a young athlete, had surgery, was able to go back and play baseball, which was my sport of choice. From what you were telling me previously, you did not. Is that correct? So walk me through what happened after that injury. Was it like game over? There's no more anything at this point. You're done.
Yeah, so it was interesting. So I remember it to this day. I mean, it was years ago. I remember I made the play. I remember instantly feeling nauseous. I remember hearing this horrible noise on my left side, like bands were stretching.
Oh
I remember
gosh.
my arm kind of like being out of place, and my coach, which he probably should have not done this, like pulling it, but I think the damage was done. I had to wait a good probably over an hour for my dad to pick me up. So my shoulder was dislocated or torn. I was sitting at the school. My dad picked me up eventually. We went home. We had to wait for my siblings to get dropped off in the bus. Some time went by. Eventually, we made it to the urgent care.
Mm.
And I remember the doctor saying, your son has a really high pain tolerance. His rotator cuff is torn, and he may need surgery. And I remember just having a conversation, and essentially, my dad saying, "Hey, you're gonna have to like rehab at home," and the doctor talked through some options on what we could have done, and he mentioned some people can just rehab it. We recommend surgery. Well, the avenue we took was, rehab it. So at that point, we're having conversations to possibly get recruited for football. I mean, I was a pretty good nose guard. I'm not gonna lie. I really loved and understood the game. And then the whole thing changed. Next thing, I'm wearing an arm brace for about 6 weeks. Really can't move my arm. Didn't really understand what was going to happen. I happened to be really smart. I was on track to be the valedictorian of my class, so I had some scholarships and things going for me with local colleges and whatnot.
Wow.
And just decided, hey, rather than going to like a SUNY Brockport, Syracuse, a St. John Fisher College, or a school that has a football program, I had gotten this letter from Nazareth College, now known as Nazareth University, saying you're approved for the presidential scholarship and the diversity scholarship, and we'll love to have you in the summer so you can acquire some credits early before the rest of your class joins. And my goal was, I'm going to do that. I'm going to stay there for a semester. It allows me to leave home, right? I wanted to get out of the house because I've always had this burning passion knowing, hey, I've always felt like it was my job to create the road that my family hadn't been to yet. Earlier, when I said my parents did the best with what they had, I really do mean that. And I've always felt like it was me to uncover what they didn't have, right? And for me to be able to pass that down to the people that come after me, but also for myself. I've always had that passion for discovery on what else is out there. And in a way, that the injury obviously was a blessing. And in a way, it feels like it was all meant to happen to put me on this road that I have been since.
So you get to Nazareth as a former football player, and what happens next?
So it's a lot all at once, right? It almost felt like freedom all at once, or finally, right? I was a straight A student in high school. I did not party. I didn't have a girlfriend. I was a drummer at church. I would go to church, go to school. I would study. I would play sports. That's it. I had a really close friend. We were best friends. He lived down the road from me, and that was really it. So I get to college, and it's like freedom at last. I've had all these ideas about the American dream and meeting people and being in college, and I'm learning about student loans, and I'm like, oh my goodness, it's a lot. So I meet some people, and I meet some track athletes that were part of the same program I was in early in the summer. And they're like, hey, we're going to meet with our track coach who recruited us. Like, if you want to come and sit down, we're going to have lunch at the dining hall. And I was like, sure, why not? Again, this whole time my plan was to be there for a semester or two, get out and play, D3 or D2 college football.
Mm.
And I sit down and I meet James Goss, who is still currently the track coach at Nazareth University. who, by the way, they are hosting the D3 Indoor National Championships here in early March. They built a facility shortly after I left. And I like to say I had some help with that because we didn't really have much of a track program before then. So we sit down and he goes, hey, how about you? Like, tell me about you. And I tell him, and I said, I'm thinking about transferring. And he goes, well, how about you become one of our throwers? And I was like, no, sir, I'm putting myself through college. I'm working 3 different jobs. I can't do it. And through some small conversations after that, I remember on the very first official day of college, this is late August, early September, I had already been on campus from late June for about a month and a half before then. I see him in the athletic gym. I remember it was the first day of school. I was like, I'm going to go get a workout, got to get ready for football whenever I leave this place. And he walks back in and he goes, hey, how about you joining that track team? And I'm like, Coach, I can't. And he goes, I give you work study. He goes, I will give you work study. You can work here at the gym. You can do your homework. You can do your workouts. We will pay you. How about then? And I still have kind of like that immigrant mentality where it's like, I'm going to capture wherever I can and I'm going to win wherever I can. So I was like, sure. I was like, I'll do it. A lot of my friends at the time that I had met in college, they were not working or they maybe had like a part-time job. And here I am having 3 different jobs and putting myself through college. So I was like, okay, let's do it. Show me. Like, what do I have to do? Now, I had an idea of what track and field was. My older brother, he was on scholarship at the UPR, the University of Puerto Rico, for the 200 and 400 meter sprints. So I knew that
fast.
He was fast. Absolutely. And shout out to my brother. He's actually now part of the Puerto Rico national youth team. He's a coach for them. And my nephew actually is a sprinter in that team himself. Wow. So I knew about track. I didn't know about the throwing events. And he goes, I'll show you. He walks me over to the equipment closet and he goes, this is a shot put. This is a discus. This is a hammer. This is a weight. And you just have to throw it far. And I remember picking up the shot put and going, it only weighs 16 pounds. I can throw this so far, man. He's like, I'm sure you can. So how about joining the team? And I go, I'm in. And then, it's just like that, join the team pretty much by accident.
So are you right-handed?
I am right-handed, yes.
But you injured your left shoulder?
Correct.
That was
very
fortunate.
Yes, it was.
Because the good shoulder still works. So you get into this, turns out you're pretty darn good at it.
Not at first.
Not at first? Okay. All right.
No,
so you go to work. You go to work and you get better.
Yes. So through that process, I meet now who is like a father figure to me and my forever coach, Dr. Charles Inforna. That year, he was just hired to be the throwing coach at Nazareth College. He has some success prior to that, coaching a national champion at Fredonia University in upstate New York. So they hire him, and they had recruited this other young man named Brandon Vulo out of Long Island, and he was recruited for shot put, and I was the walk-in kid, right? So we have a first teams meeting. I remember being all excited, going back to the beginning, right? The sense of identity, the sense of belonging. I'm part of the team. I understand the dynamic of doing hard things, and I'm just going to be good, and I'll be fine, right? Met my throwing coach, Dr. Inforna, and at the time, him and I did not hit it off. He's like, here's this kid, just coming off the street, At the time, there was some dilemma with my human biology class. I should have not been on it. I was not good with human biology. I was told that I could drop it without getting a failed grade. Long story short, I end up dropping the class. My advisor gave me some inaccurate information, so I was ineligible to compete that semester.
Oh my gosh.
He's like, this kid barely made it in the team, and he already can't compete. So he tells the story better than I can, but he goes, I know that I'm never going to see him again. So shortly after that first team meeting, he has a conversation with me and he goes, hey, you're ineligible. Like you dropped under 12 credits. Like you can't compete. You can't train with us. And I go, okay. I said, I understand. I'm sorry. Send me the workouts. And he goes, yeah. Okay. So he sends me the workouts. And winter break comes through and I do every single workout and more. And at that point, YouTube, this is 2012, 2013, YouTube became my best friend. I started researching Olympic hammer throwing, Olympic weight throwing, discus, shot put, and just watching videos and just learning and going, okay. And I think honestly, part of it was because I saw that he had doubt in what I could do. Like the moment when he had the conversation with me about, sure, do the
Mm.
workout, you're ineligible. I saw the twinkle of him being like, this, I'm never going to see this kid again.
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, I'm going to show him that a lot of people have counted me out my entire life, and that's not, so this really started just me out of trying to prove someone wrong.
Mm-hmm.
So I came back, I did all the workouts, and we had our first meet. And on our first meet, I didn't even have throwing shoes. My teammate Brandon let me borrow his throwing shoes, and I made finals, and I didn't even know what it was. He goes, "You made finals," and I was like, "Sure, great." And from there, it went from, I'll pause in case you have any questions, but it went from making finals on my very first track meet at Brockport University to just going in a journey filled with lessons and honestly what I feel is the luckiest sequence of events that someone could have out of just that one experience.
Well, it's clear to me that there's no shortage of hustle in you. And I can imagine that is well ingrained, all probably before 12 years old, but certainly after 12 and having to come to a foreign place and find your place in that. What did it feel like being back on a team again?
It felt awesome. Honestly, it felt very accomplishing because the track family is very unique. I had done team sports before that, and track is very special in my heart, just because it's a team, but it's an individual sport, right? Even the 4x4. Yes, you're running with a team, but it's your responsibility to make sure that you finish that lap. It's your responsibility to make sure that you keep that pace. And the throwing events is the same thing too. Like, you have a coach, you have a team, but at the end of the day, if you foul out or if you don't throw far enough, it's on you. Either you did the work or you didn't do the work. So for me, it was like, oh, like, I'm not part of this team because they need me to be part of the team. I'm part of the team because my individual contribution that I make is valuable enough for me to have a place in this team. And for me, that felt very rewarding because there was a perfect correlation. You train, you perform well, you essentially earn your keep, right? And you're able to build relationships through that and also lift other people up. And I was very lucky that I got in that team in its early stages. If you look at our roster pictures, and sometimes I'll go on the website and kind of look up the rosters from 2012 all the way to 2016, you see the men's team, I think the first year was maybe like 8 to 12 guys. And if you look at it now, they're close to almost 30 guys just on the track and field side. So it's cool to know that I was able to do it in such an early stage. And I like to believe that I had something to do with continuing to grow that culture that today lives on as Empire 8 champions. Go Flyers.
That's cool. That is cool. So, and not to give away the story before we get there, but you went all in with this and got pretty darn good. So, kind of summarize what the next several, I guess, years look like for you and where track and field took you.
Yeah. And Josh, in full honesty, I don't know if you've ever had someone on your podcast that has cried, and hopefully crying is allowed. And it's not me crying out of sadness if I do cry. I think it's more out of, being able to reflect and realize how thankful I am for my experiences. But essentially, honestly, it almost feels like race horses, right? They have the blinders on the side,
Mm-hmm.
and
Yeah.
so they can just focus. And that's what it felt like to me. After my first meet, I could see the perception in my track and my throwing coach change. Like, oh, I think that we might have lightning in a bottle here, right? And our conversation started to change. Now, there's something to the story that I'll kind of leave for the end that ties into this, but at the time, Charles Inforna, or Dr. Inforna, he was working towards getting his doctorate in research, right? And he took a very different approach to coaching. And we had some conversations after my first meet, and he was like, "What are your goals? Like, is this just like a sport to you that you want to do, or like, what do you want to do?" And I remember even back then, being an 18, 19-year-old kid, being like, "No, I want to win. Like, you think we can do this? I'm not going to transfer. I'm all in on track and field." And he was like, "Okay." He goes, "Let's do it." He goes, "But we need to do it in a way that it can't be nonchalant. Like, we need to make sure that we're tracking everything. We need to have workouts. We need to check in on a daily basis." And I was like, "Okay, let's go." So from there, it was a matter of my plans had to change. I'm not transferring anymore. I'm not playing football. I'm going to stay here, right? I had fallen in love with the school. I had gotten my routine. Into my sophomore year, I became an RA because it helped paying for staying on campus, right? I didn't have to get an apartment or stay at home. and just continue training, and just fell in love. Again, going back to the idea of what I put in is what I'm going to get out. What I put in is what I'm going to get out. And a lot of these things throughout this journey, it was things that I was identifying and figuring out myself, because my father didn't go to college. My mom did not go to college. My stepmom did not go to college, right? So now I was entering into uncharted territory when it comes to experiences. So I'm no longer, not that I couldn't, right? But for me to go back and ask them for advice of where I was in life was difficult, because they were like, I didn't go to college. Like, I don't know how to do life once I'm there. Like, you need to go and figure it out. So I took a lot of pride in that. And I said, if I'm going to do this, I'm going to go all in. You know, I've been in worse situations in my life. So let's do it. So essentially we go, you know, we have our first season, we go to conference. I ended up qualifying for conference. My freshman year, I broke the school record, which wasn't that far. I think it was 11 meters and some change, right? And it was time for summer. So summer is usually the time, obviously, you know, kids are on their own. And I was given a workout program by my coach. He goes, you do this. Like, this is, you need to prepare, because next year we need to focus on more technique, and we need to keep on the journey that we're on. So similar to before, right? Similar to that winter break before that freshman year, I went to work. I mean, I was working an internship job, and I was training at night for hours. I was in the gym. I was gaining weight. I was getting stronger. I was lifting. I was watching videos. I was looking for resources. And I would constantly checking in with my coach. Come back sophomore year, have a better year. You know, now we're talking into state and regional conference. Have another record-breaking year. Now I'm throwing in the 12 to 14 meter range. Right, we're getting into the like, you're getting good kind of stuff. School-wise, I was good. I had a rough first year grade-wise, just because of the adjustment, but then my grade stayed pretty much at like a 3.2 for the rest of the time there. Continue training, continue getting better. And then we go into the summer of my junior year. I had an internship in Virginia, went super strict on the lifting there too, and the training. And we come back to my junior year, where I made my first All-American. You know, at this point, I had understood the event pretty well, the technique pretty well. We had our eyes set on the prize. No one ever in Nazareth College history before that had made nationals in the throwing field events. The year prior, we had our first All-American, who was part of my class, Taylor. She was an All-American for the long jump, and that was a huge accomplishment for our team and for the program. So junior year, I make it to nationals, you know, and here I am, the kid who's never thrown before, with kids that have been throwing since they were kids. We're at nationals. I was seated outside of the top 8, I believe, and the top 8 make All-American. And I remember being super nervous. And in between there, and sorry that I'm rambling, hopefully it all makes sense. In between there, my coach actually left. The coach that I met my freshman year, he took a year off, and I had this new coach. We really didn't get along. Like, he wasn't as specific as my other coach, but hey, you know, went to nationals and I made All-American. I think I placed, I think it was, I don't know, I have the plaque somewhere, but I made All-American. I finished, it was certainly top 6 or top 7 in the country. And I was like, okay, like, I need to get the band back together, as in I need my coach to come back. That summer after junior year, he calls me, he goes, I'm back. Like, the band is back. We're going to get back to it. And the goal at this point was, we want to win a national title. We want to be the first one to win a national title. And this is where everything and all the experiences I had from a kid and from college really came together, right? I feel like I was really turning into a man, right? I was 21, 22 years old. I had adjusted a lot of different things in my life. And I was like, this is what's going to help me catapult my life to wherever I want it to be. I don't know what it looks like. I don't know why, but I had this intuition that if I can achieve this goal of becoming a national champion, I will have the understanding and the basis of being able to achieve anything in life. And pretty much, you know, that's exactly how it played out my senior year. I went undefeated in the indoor season. Not a single meet I lost. I had 11 meets. I won every single meet. At the national championships, I was never second in any throw. So every attempt that I had, I was first, meaning the guys that were behind me did not have a chance to win. And on my third throw, I essentially put a sealed on it where I threw 20 meters and 45 centimeters. So my freshman year, I was an 11-meter thrower, and I almost
Almost doubled
doubled
it. Wow.
by the time I was a senior.
That is exponential growth. And I don't know anything about track and field or throwing, but that seems like a difficult thing to do in a short period of time, no matter what your athletic ability is. Did you do anything with this after college?
I did. So, I was over the moon because I remember reflecting back, and remember, like I said, like a racehorse from like my freshman year to senior year, it was just work, work, work. And I was never really settling or reflecting or celebrating anything. I was conference champion, regional champion, New York State record holder, national top 6 all-time number. And I was like, this is incredible. So I had some time to reflect. And during that time of reflection, graduation was coming up as a senior. For the outdoor season, I ended up finishing 3rd in the hammer. So I was an All-American again. At the end of my collegiate career, I was a 4-time All-American and 1-time national champion. And I'm sitting there and I'm like, oh my goodness, it's done. Like when people say college goes by like that, they mean it, and I think it was like April or something. And I graduated in May, and I was like, man, this kind of really sucks. Like this does not feel good at all. And my coach, Charles Inforna, had a conversation with me again. And he goes, hey, I have an idea. Let's reach out to Puerto Rico. You were born there. You have citizenship there. Let's see if we can either get you funding or get you some support from Team Puerto Rico, and you go into a development training plan for the next Olympic year. How about that? And I'm like, sure. At this point, I believed anything he said. He goes, also during this time, you can get your master's. So get your master's, work a job, train professionally to be a track athlete. And this is how we're going to do it. And I was like, yes, sir. Let's go. I applied to grad school, got in. I applied to be a coach's assistant, so they paid for some of my credits. So I was able to give back to my team, which was super important to me, right? Going back to, yes, it's great to achieve and it's great to do the things that you don't want to do or things that are hard, but it's more important to come back and educate those people about what that might look like. So to me, it was really important to be able to do that. So went through grad school and just kept getting better, kept searching for resources and people that were better than me. During this time, as I was looking at YouTube videos and former American Olympic champions, I came across a gentleman named Judd Logan, who became my idol. And he is, if you ever meet anyone else who is a hammer thrower or is part of the track and field family, they will know who Coach Logan is. He was a 4-time Olympian, was a coach at Ashland University in Ohio, and he had the most successful track and field team in the country across all divisions. So he was like, we call Ashland University the Valhalla of hammer throwing.
Oh, wow.
And all the other Olympians that have come out, for the U.S. in the early 2000s, mid 2000s, came out of Ashland through his program. So organically, I, went to a conference. He was there. I met some of his athletes, became friends with one of them. He was a national champion the same year that I won a national title in Division II. Kept staying in touch. Through grad school, I was taking trips to Ohio to train with my friend Jordan, and who was an athlete of Coach Logan. So I got to spend time with this idol of mine, right? I got to see his training regimen and how hard they trained and how specific everything was. And my dream that I knew I was never going to achieve, or I thought I was never going to achieve, was to have the opportunity to move to Ashland and train there, right? So 2 years go by while I'm in grad school, and it was April of 2017, I believe, and I was in Ashland for the weekend training, and something just came over me, and I had conversations with Coach Charles Inforna before this, and I said, I'm going to ask him. I said, I'm going to go up to him and I'm going to ask him. I'm going to do the hardest thing that I've ever thought about, which is get out of my comfort zone, ask the person that I admire the most, who's like an idol to me, and say, would you train this D3 retired athlete who's trying to be a professional? And I remember being nervous all weekend about it. I was like, oh my God, he's going to say no. Like, there's no way. And we had this practice before I was supposed to drive back to Buffalo. And at the end of it, randomly all his athletes were done, and it was just him and I. And I took my last throw, and he kind of started walking out to the field to retrieve my hammer with me, which he really never does that. And I go, Coach, if I move here, would you train me? Just like that. And he goes, yep. He turns around, gets in his truck, and he leaves. And that was it.
That was the extent of the conversation.
That was it.
Oh
From
my
there,
gosh.
I packed my stuff. I went back to Buffalo. At the time, I broke up with my girlfriend that I was dating. She was a Canadian citizen, so I knew that, I was not moving to Canada. She's not moving to the States. I packed up all my stuff. I started looking for work in Ashland, and about a month later, I was living in Ashland, Ohio.
Wow. And so from there, you train with one of the best. And so, and I want to know what you did. Obviously, this is very, very important. But what stands out to me is that you took advantage of every opportunity that was given you, and I think that is really cool to see. And in a lot of these adventure conversations with folks, it's many times the people do these, whether it's a challenge or pursuit. Rarely is it at a young age going, I'm going to do this. It starts with, well, that door opened and I did that and I got really good at it. And then, lo and behold, another door opened and several things happened, but you can't control the doors opening, but you can control your response when that happens. And so what I've heard you say over and over again is that, whether it's the immigrant in you that is hustling for it, or, just out of a wisdom that, okay, this is a chance and I'm going to take full advantage of it. You've done it at every step of the way. So when this opportunity to train with one of the best came along, I can imagine you were all in. But talk to me a little bit about what the difficulty of this next level. Like, were there moments where you're like, I want to do this, but I don't know that I'm cut out for it? Or were there that dark side of the mind that, is trying to shut the activity down? Did that come up for you along the way? And if so, what did you do with it?
Josh, I gotta say, by the way, you're an incredible interviewer, and good on you for picking up on that. So I like to say, and I've actually thought about this before, I like to say that my time before I got to Ohio was a physical challenge, right? I've always had doubt that I physically wasn't strong enough, or I had doubt that I could not lift the heavy weights required to, be an elite athlete. And I was able to accomplish that, right? I went from, squatting 315 pounds to, I think my all-time best squat is 550 pounds.
Wow.
So I did that, being able to bench almost 400 pounds, being able to squat almost 600 pounds. And before getting to Ohio at Nazareth College, it was me getting stronger and learning and being like, oh, I can do this. I am strong. I am capable. Now, the mental conditioning came once I got to Ohio, right? Because yes, I took the big leap. Yes, I took the risk. Yes, I'm here. But now how do I overcome the doubt that, oh my God, they're going to find out that I'm not as good as the people that have come before me. Oh my God, Coach Logan is going to realize that I really am not an elite athlete, right? All these collegiate athletes that are in his roster, some of them are better than me, and I'm supposed to be a professional athlete.
Yeah. So do you have self-talk to get yourself through that, or what is it that overcomes the imposter that pops up when that happens?
It doesn't. I have imposter syndrome right now. I think it's more of the idea that I think once you realize that a lot of people have that, and that a lot of people who, from your perspective, may seem like they have it figured out, once you normalize that and realize that everyone was a baby not too long ago, like you were someone's baby a couple years ago, someone used to hold you, right? Your insecurities might be different than mine, but you still have them. And I think that once we normalize that, we understand that it is very normal. So what essentially,
But did you do that as a 20-something young man that's still trying to pursue this? Like, did you have that understanding at that time?
I did. Yeah.
Really?
Yeah. I'm kind of in a weird way, and I don't take credit for this. I kind of have like this hippie mentality where it's like this connection to simplifying everything to the very bottom. And that's what I did in that situation. I said,
that's awesome.
I can't control, right? Like I'm here, right? So at the very least, what I can do is trust that he sees something in me the same way that Dr. Charles and Forna saw something in me before, right? So in a time where when I was growing up, maybe I didn't feel that from my family too much, right? And it's not that they weren't trying, right? It's just maybe they didn't have the tools to do it. But when I found it with Dr. Inforna, I'm like, oh, they see something in me and I'm going to deliver. And then I saw Coach Logan take the leap and say, sure, kid, come on, I'll train you. I'm going to take you to the highest level. I was like, I have these insecurities, right? But I cannot have them prove, like, I need to prove them wrong. Like, if people around me think that I'm crazy for doing this, I need to prove them wrong. And I will not be one of those people that fails. It is not an option, right? And I grew up with my dad always telling me that failure is not an option. And I really carried that with me where I was like, I'm here now. Like, let's get to work. And that's exactly what we did. I mean, it was a very rigorous, it was probably some of the hardest physical things I've ever done. I mean, he had me doing Russian workouts. I was working on 2-a-days again, traveling. He's like, we need to change your body composition. I remember the first training session we had, he says, I'm going to break you and then I'm going to build you back up. And that's exactly what he did for 3 years.
Wow.
Yeah.
So let's fast forward to the end. Where did this get you?
Mentally, it got me to a place to realize that one, nothing is impossible. I say that that's the most important thing. The moment I did that, I was like, if I was able to move to Ashland and train under the man that I like, who is my idol, and he trusted me to at some point coach his team, then nothing is impossible, right? So that's where it got me there. And then the second part is, if you work hard and you do everything that you can control, no one or anything can take that away from you, right? And the third thing to that, and it's probably the most important thing, and I have to remind myself of this, right? Because there's a side effect to having the mentality that I have. And the side effect is that it never stops. You're always constantly go, right? And I'm getting to the point now where I want to control when it's time to go and when it's not, so we can enjoy the present. But something that he would always say is, you're not as good as your best days, and you're not as bad as your bad days. You are the man in the middle. And I say that's something that every day at some point I think about, right? I say that that's where it got me, is really, the accolades. By the way, I ended up competing in the USATF Nationals. I was on ESPN. I finished top 6 in the US 2 years in a row. But what really sticks with me is really not that, is the mental fortitude and the mental toughness to be able to analyze situations and look at them differently and say, I'm going to tackle that and I'm going to overcome it because I know that I've done harder things before. And I know that there's people that actually count on me to do so.
That's not a bad accomplishment for a former washed out football player that walked onto a track and field team.
I know, right?
Yeah. Yeah. And that mentality. So here's the thing that the curious question that comes up for me is, none of us get through this life able to really avoid suffering of one level or another, avoiding failure of one level or another, So I have that voice in my head that failure is not an option. It is very, very helpful at times. It is very unhelpful at other times, because sometimes failure is inevitable. And then the healthy response there that I've got to remind myself is that there's learning there. Some of the greatest learning is in the failure and the not doing. So where, if something pops to mind, where has the flip side of that coin showed itself in your life, where things didn't go your way, or you didn't accomplish the thing, but this grounding from your prior experiences really were important to get you through that?
Yeah. And to kind of go a little bit into your point about failure is not an option, that has morphed through time, and to your point about, and I think this may have been before we actually started recording, is that when things happen to you or when things don't go your way, now I don't really so much look at them as that's failure. When I say now failure is not an option, is I cannot fail to look at the things that happen to me as a lesson.
Oh, that's good. That's a good shift.
Myth, right? Yeah. I'm not perfect. You know what I'm saying? Like I'm gonna fail. This morning I had a typo in an email at work, right? But failure is if I don't learn from that typo. It's not that typo in itself. So I say that that's how it has been able to kind of change. is, well, what exactly is failure? Well,
Mm-hmm.
it's not you incapable of being able to like achieve something. It's the fact that to understand and change your perspective on what failure is. And failure is to fail, to learn from something or improve from something.
Yeah, that's the mature reframing. And I know, like, in at stages of my life, the immature view of that phrasing was perfection or nothing,
Hmm.
right? It was I have to be perfect or I've missed the mark,
Yep.
and that's unhealthy. That
Very.
gets to really bad spots at times. So I love that reshift. That is a great, really, really helpful reframe for what failure means. So in this stage of your life, post sports, no matter how good you are at a sport, it all ends for us at some point, right? Just some of us, me being included, a little bit earlier than others, whether
Yeah.
we want to or not. But if you're the world's best baseball player, at some point you can't do that anymore. And so I'm curious too, like, what was that transition like into the rest of your life, and where did it take you?
Yeah. I struggled with this too. And I say a lot of the stuff, Josh, really happened organically. Like, I feel like when I hear other people's stories, it's like, oh, and it was just such a big, torn out of my life.
Yeah.
Where to me, it almost feels like everything just fell into place like it was supposed to. And I think that me just being thankful that I was able to
Yeah.
leave that small island and was able to get through high school and get to college and get, all the little small wins just added up to me saying, I'm just going to be thankful for what comes my way, right? Like, I'm going to just take my hands off, and rather than trying to control it, which we all still try every day, I'm going to just try and enjoy it. So COVID happened. It was the Olympic year that I was supposed to go to the Olympics.
Oh,
Here I am with a master's degree, making $11 an hour, working at Under Armour, training twice a day. Coach Logan at the time, he was diagnosed with cancer, and it was like this overwhelming feeling of like, it's time that you leave Ashland. Like your time here is done. I got his blessing, spoke with him. I was thankful that he let me spend time there. He was thankful that I spent time there. We got really close during that time. And I had friends that were living in Raleigh. I had visited Raleigh, and I said, hey, like, I'm going to make my way down there. And
hmm.
organically, I had a job that had an opening here. So I was able to just transfer. And throughout this time, my goal was, hey, I know some people that are throwers that, compete at a UNC, and I'm going to just go train with them. But it started to feel like it didn't feel organic. And I had these goals to get into real estate. I had these goals to now start building like my professional side. And slowly, and what I like to think in a healthy way, just started to kind of separate the two and being like, okay, like maybe this is time where we go, rather than being sad that it's not happening anymore, let's be happy that it happened. And let's be thankful that it happened. And let's keep everything with us that we learned, right? And my focus really became sales. I got my first technology sales job, which I'm still currently in, and it's competitive, right?
Mm-hmm.
And the moment I learned how competitive it was, I was like, well, I know that none of you in my team have gone through what I've been through. I know that none of you had a Coach Logan in your life like I had. So I'm gonna be able to I don't want to say walk through this, but I'm gonna show you guys what true grit looks like.
Mm-hmm.
And I applied the same thing to that, right? I was one of the first DMs within my company to hit their highest markers in less than a year. I made President's Club. If I don't want to talk about the company I work for, but I work for a pretty big tech company. I made President's Club within my first 2 years, which is like unheard of. Being able to get promoted several times and just kind of put that focus there. And then throughout that process too, just continued working out and saying, okay, I've built my body to be a machine of explosion and strength. How can I now put that focus to build my body to be useful for me as I go through life so I can continue to face these challenges and these lessons? So
Yeah.
I've slowly, for the last 5 years, I've gone from 270 pounds. Today I weigh in about 224, 225 pounds. I've got into jujitsu. I've always loved mixed martial arts. So I've been doing jujitsu now for over a year, putting that same mentality into that. Jiu-jitsu is another sport where you need to learn lessons every day, and there's no end to it, right? It's like you do
Mm-hmm.
jiu-jitsu for the rest of your life. So there's flavorings of what I've done, and I think that rather than just applying it in one thing, I've said, okay, now that I've gotten this experience, how can I plug and play with different things that are my passion, that are fun to me, where I can get the I can get the same amusement or the same pleasure of success with things that I enjoy. And that's what I've done. I found different things that are really hard. No one wants to be up at 5:30 in the morning getting choked out by another guy, before they send their first email. I do that 3 times a week before I start work. Training for triathlons and not doing triathlons, like just doing the swimming, the biking, the running, and going, I'm not going to do it. I just want to put myself through it to show myself that I can do it. So that's really what it's morphed to. And recently I say, there needs to be balance in the world, and you can't be 100% in something, because you're certainly going to be lacking in the other. And what I mean by that is you can't be, like you were saying, perfection is the only way. There needs to be balance. Mm-hmm. And I think that I'm finally in a point in my life where it's time to kind of smell the roses and be like, I've put so much hard work. I put a lot of pressure on myself to be where I am. About to be 31 in a few weeks, and I feel really blessed with everything that I have compared to, the 12-year-old child who came to the States, had nothing. And I want to be present and I want to enjoy it. So I'm putting those same lessons into the things that now are more life specific, right? So rather than saying you're not as good as you are or as bad as you are, be the man in the middle, rather than saying that regarding to a professional sport, now I'm saying in life, right? I need to be kind to myself. I need to be the man in the middle for myself. I need to be the man in the middle for my friends, right? For my significant other, for my family, and putting those same lessons or applying those same lessons into that. And just being someone who is flexible, being someone who understands that there really isn't bad or good. There's just experiences, and the bad things that happen, right, that we label as bad, are just as useful as the good things. And it's a matter of how we handle them. And lately, I'm thankful that I've had the resources to be able to learn more about that and just understand that I'm just thankful for the life experience that I'm having. And I'm just going to make sure that I take advantage of every single opportunity, because I know that nothing's going to go wrong, because there's no wrong. It's just an experience, right? Yeah. And I'm looking to capture as many experiences as possible until my time comes up.
I mean, that's the kind of that's a really rich, solid gold foundational understanding of life. And I also don't think it comes free. That kind of grounding is only gained through it being earned. And I think you've done a great job of describing what life was growing up, the chosen challenges, the unchosen challenges, and how it's made you better every time. And it's kind of stunning to me that at every step along the way, you had this kind of elderly wisdom almost to objectively look at your situation and get the good out of it, rather than getting bogged down into the negativity, which I'm sure had ample opportunities to get stuck in a really dark place. And even, we didn't get into this very much, but even what you just kind of blew over of having the end of your career essentially forced upon you with COVID, and then you just naturally went to the next thing. That tells me that your identity was not wrapped around the thing that you were doing, exactly, which is a very healthy thing that is not true for most high-level athletes. Mm-hmm. That last day is sometimes the hardest day of their life, and you just blew right through it. You just went on to the next thing and seemed very ready. So, at almost 31, I am certain of a couple things, and that is that you will have very at different times of your life still left. You will have challenges. You will have suffering. You will have hardship. But I'm also pretty confident in what you said, that you got the tools to face that and get through it better, which is really a difficult thing to do. So what is it? This is a podcast about adventure, seeking challenge, finding out and discovering about who we really are on the inside and what we're capable of. What do you, if you had to guess in the next 10 years between now and your early 40s, what do you think that looks like? Where does adventure and challenge fit in for you?
Oh, That's almost like the question I've been asking myself. I say doing just more things that I never thought that I would do. As simple as that. For me, really, I'm excited to travel. I'm excited to see my nephews grow. I'm excited to, at some point start my family, hopefully in my 30s, and be able to pass this wisdom down. I'm excited for what's to come, because so far it has been so great, the good and the bad. I wouldn't be who I am if it wasn't for the bad, to your point. But really, I guess where it takes me is just taking on the next challenge. I have a very open mind to anything, really, and also believing that it's earned, never given. So
Yeah.
I'm just gonna go earn it for the next 10 years, whatever that looks like, earn my keep. And whether that is through making sure I'm taking care of my mental health, my body, the people around me, not putting focus on things that really aren't important. And just continuing to just appreciate the small things. I really, you know what, not that I take everything I just said back, but what I'm looking forward to for the next 10 years is enjoying the small things.
Yeah. And any of us have to slow down enough to be able to do that. As you described earlier, if you keep the blinders on, and that's like when you do that, and that's telling your brain that it's go time, and like you lock into that mentality that you're really good at, that is not conducive for slowing your thoughts and slowing your breath and slowing your body to experience life where you're at, be where your feet are. And
Exactly.
so that's going to be your challenge, I'm sure. But like you've had this entire, people listening to this aren't going to know this, but for the last hour, you've told this entire story with a smile on your face the whole time. And I can imagine that that's how you go through life, like good, bad, or
I try
indifferent.
to.
Yeah. You're going to be ready for what's next and enjoy it along the way, which is pretty awesome.
What I like to say, well, I like to say is this. At times I sit down and I go, I'm living somebody else's dream life. That's the way I look at it.
Man.
And that makes me really happy. And I'm thankful for that. I'm really thankful that there's, and I feel like a lot of people are certainly living in somebody else's dream and they don't realize it. And I'm just thankful that at an early age, I realize that. So there's someone out there that's going through a worse time than I am, that if they got to live one day in my life, they would be like, this is the dream. And I don't know where it came from, and I don't know how I got that wisdom, but I'm happy that I did, because that's why I have a smile on my face, is because I never thought once that someone would want to speak to me and learn about my story. And that's awesome. That's a celebration, and I'm really thankful for that. I'm living somebody else's dream. The same way that you're living somebody else's dream. There's someone out there that wishes they had a podcast, There's someone out there that wishes they knew how to play the guitar or had all the medals you had, and they'll never be able to achieve that. So you're living someone's dream. And I think that to me, that grants a smile 24/7.
Yeah.
It's like, wow, like I lucked out, man. All I can do is smile.
Man, that is such a great way to put a bow on this conversation, and it's such a good reminder for me. I do this podcast for a couple reasons, but because like I get to be encouraged and inspired and challenged and by some incredible people, and the could our paths have crossed at some point? Maybe, but they did because of this platform, right? And what I also know, and kind of back to what you just were saying, that the times when I get really focused on what is happening to me, like this really self-centered view of the world, it's miserable. But when I can step out of that and go, man, as you just did, regardless of all the things that have happened, you're picking out the things to be grateful for. You're picking out the things that make your life unique and special, while there's a myriad of other things you could be focusing on that to the negative, you're choosing not to. And the few times that I'm able to do that, life feels totally different. If life feels lighter, there's more options, there's more capacity. And so I I appreciate this conversation because it's been an hour reminder of me to continue to try to focus on those things to keep a smile on my face too. So, Lewis,
Thank
I
you, Josh.
appreciate this. This has been awesome. Spending a Friday evening with me, and I'm excited to put this out into the podcast universe and go from there, man. Thanks for your time.
Absolutely. Thank you. I'm looking forward to it. Thank you so much.
Okay. Man, I really enjoyed that. I hope you did as well. The next one will be coming at you in a couple weeks, so stay tuned. Until then, I hope you have your own great adventure.